So today we're specifically focusing on designing your network strategy as a tool. So I'm just going to jump right into it. I am going to give an overview of the partner method to explain the context in which this particular piece of it sits. We didn't really do too much of that at the NLTA. The introduction of the VNL network strategy document, which I hope is posted in Thinkific now, but I'll have to check later to make sure it got in there. I wanted to have time to discuss some of these dimensions, and since I feel like we are kind of a smaller group, I'm not going to do breakouts. It just will take too much time. And then I am going to give you an overview of the partner tool because it is step 3, and we are going to open the partner tool as a free, use of it for everyone in the NLTA to use. And we're kind of hoping that you'll come along with us on this journey of implementing the strategy survey and things like that. So I want to kind of give a little bit of an intro to that, and then we'll talk more about it later. Okay, when I refer to the partner method, what I mean by that is it is a methodology that is accompanies our partner platform. And we have worked with hundreds of networks and supporting them on evaluation and data to inform their strategies and the way they do their work. So we developed the partner method to formalize that a little bit and help people kind of understand a path that we believe takes them to the place where they'll have the most effective and successful networks. We believe that when we have data, that data is empowering, that data is learning, and that data helps us understand the decisions we make versus building networks and relationships off of kind of chance, off of our gut instinct, because it's such a human thing to do. It's so relational, natural to build relationships that we kind of might assume that we should just do it with our gut. And we have found that if we do it with just even a little bit of data and a little bit of learning, we can actually build more equitable and successful networks. So the partner method has these 5 steps. The first thing that we work on is shifting to a network mindset. So if you were part of the NLTA session 1, you were indoctrinated in getting a new network mindset. That's all that step 1 is. It just means we try to orient folks to network science, this idea that more might not be better, that we can measure and put data and different ways of working into our workflow. So that's step 1. Step 2 is designing your strategy. So once you have decided you're going to do networks and build networks, rather than just leave it to chance, we think if you have a set strategy that you will be able to know whether you're meeting your mark, know whether you need to make adjustments. And so we work a lot. The next few NLTAs will be, we'll go into depth on these different areas of strategy. There's so many areas of strategy, as you'll see today. We can't even cover them all in our 2 sessions. The third step is to track that progress and networks over time. And this is where we introduce our partner platform as a way to track these networks and understand, visualize them, things like that. But then, as all good quality improvement processes have, we have an adapt and enact step where we say, once you have that data, we encourage folks to adapt what you are doing based on your learning and then to enact those new strategies. So we have different versions of online courses, and that's kind of old from a slide. I could say there, learn more at the NLTA. So that's what we're up to here. So today we're really focused on step 2, which is designing your network strategy. I didn't even know that would do that. So that was really fancy. I just wanted to recall from session 1 that what we are trying to do here, and I'm not going to explain this whole slide again since most of you have been there, but we do call this the life cycle of a sustainable network, and how networks naturally kind of move from this phase 1 of having a group of partners working on something where you want to invite more people in and diversify your networks. Phase 2, connecting the dots and getting everyone together. Phase 3, where we're really in this more is better strategy, with just means like, let's connect. Let's all have lots of meetings with lots of connections, but without a real strategy. Phase 4 is where we really believe that you start to make really effective change. And that's when you have committed to a strategy, that people have a role, they are invited when they need to play that role, and that you're not going to invite them to every single meeting because that is overwhelming and taxing. So to get our really high quality interactions and connections, we really need to move into phase 4. So this intention of our method and this phase 2 is to help people really get from a phase 3 to a phase 4. So I am going to talk about what the partner platform is, but I'm going to save that into after we go through the strategy document, because I want to jump right into that. I'll just say this: the partner platform, it stands for, partner is an acronym. It stands for the program to analyze, record, and track networks to enhance relationships. I always joke that we built this when I was working at the Rand Corporation, and that took a whole meeting, but a really smart mathematician who wore Hawaiian shirts to come up with that acronym for us. And you can go to partnertool.net, and that links you to the Visible Network Labs website, where you can just find more information about it. So, but I'm not going to go into that so much right now in the background of it, because I want to make sure that we have the most time to spend on our strategy document. So this, if it's not already in the Thinkific link, it will be. I can tell you I'm zoomed pretty far out right now. This is set up right now in a Excel sheet, and we are working actively in getting it into a different format, because I cannot tell you how much time I have just spent reformatting this over and over again. So it's not the best tool, but as an online tool like this, however, the format it's in right now, you can print it. So it's designed right now to print as a handout to have other people work on it. That's why it was so difficult to actually get it in this framework, but we're putting it into the partner platform so you can actually use it in a more digital way. Okay, so the idea of having a strategy, what we mean by that is that we literally mean that you have intentional decisions that you've made about your network and how you're going to structure it, how it's going, what type of network you want to be, what its purpose is, who the members are, what the life cycle of it is, when it's going to end, and so forth. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to walk you through this spreadsheet and all the information in it at a high level. I want you all to know that I am a friendly conversational person, so you can raise your hand, ask questions, things like that. I don't tend to look at the chat while I'm talking, so if that's something that I need to do, just someone needs to let me know. So just a little background on it. This information came from, the first time I saw data put together like this around networks was when I was doing a training for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they had come up with a similar format for one of their projects. We took that format and we started populating it with information, data, research, science, our own learning from our own projects into these categories. And so partners have helped us build this. It's full of what we call information from what we call our insights library. So we have an insight.
Danielle?
Yeah.
Do you need to be showing us the spreadsheet? Right now we're seeing the PowerPoint.
Oh, yes, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, someone else noticed that as well. Probably many of us. Thank you.
Okay. Ta-da! Here it is. My apologies, you all. Okay, so here it is, full of all kinds of information. Okay, I will turn on the chat. All right, so the point that I'm trying to make here is that this is full of information that hopefully we have compiled in one place for you. It is we call it a living document. We're always updating it. We're trying to be on top of the latest trends and things that people are talking about. And at the same time, it's never going to be fully comprehensive. So the way that you would use this worksheet is, and then I'm going to go through each of the sections, is you could use this. The idea is you could use it for yourself, and you as a manager or a coordinator of a network can go through this, and what we ask folks to do is to circle choices in each row of where they think they are right now, and then to star where you want to be. And that's an important little caveat, because a strategy, we should be thinking futuristically, but we have to take stock of where we are now. So what we're doing with the strategy document is trying to help understand the gap between where we are and where we want to be. If you want to get really fancy with this, you take this to maybe like the network's like leadership team, maybe the key stakeholder group, and you have them do it. And what we do with these when we hand them out to people, I know we're in COVID, so that's why I was trying so hard to make this more of an online useful thing, and it's been challenging, but we give it to folks usually in a meeting, and we have them go through it, and just, it's very informal. Circle where you are, star where you want to be. And then we compile it after, and it has some really great conversation. It's a great conversation starter. It helps us have focus. It helps us get on the same page. It helps us put us in the place where we need to be in order to successfully create strategies. And then as a next step, after we go through this and compile it, that's usually when we administer the partner survey that is accompanies this. It matches this, and that way to the whole network. And then we can get a sense from the whole network of where we are. And all of this work is letting us understand where we are and where we want to be and how to get there. So the purpose of this is to help us build action steps that help us get from where we are to where we want to be. So I'm going to go ahead and start to go through this. So these directions just say that. Really what's in here is a little note that this is a free tool from VNL. We want to make sure no one else is selling it as to other people. And so the only thing we ask is that it would also be shared freely to others. And so it's a tool for other networks to use. So I'm going to go through this. Let me pause for just 1 second. Does anyone have any questions at this point that would be helpful for me to pause? And I see that a few people are saying that the file's not quite there yet, but it should.
I was just going to say, this is Melinda. So there's some Thinkific access issues. I thought I had the admin access, but it's not working. So I tried to put the file in the chat, and that's not working either. So Barry posted it on Google Docs, so I will be sending that link here in a second. So okay. Hopefully that will work.
Okay. The formatting is probably going to be funny if we share it in the drive, but we'll work on that. I didn't anticipate the complexity of doing this in Excel. Thanks, Melinda. Okay, so let's start going through this. So I'm going to start with just going through over here the areas that this sheet covers. So we cover type of network, purpose, membership, outcomes, governance, stage of network development, the life cycle of the network, management, structure and quantity of interactions, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and assessment, evaluation, and learning. All right, so that's the highest level. So those are dimensions, and it is a lot of information, but these are areas that we have spent a great deal of time actually measuring and trying to understand in networks, and trying to think about ways that we can build better networks around these areas. So the next thing I'm going to do here is go through questions to consider. So even if you don't go through any of the choices and you just started with questions to consider, that would be a starting point for you. And again, this is a tool for you as an individual. It's a tool for your the group of folks that are supporting you and helping you coordinate, and it's a tool for the whole network. You all might remember one of our values in network leadership is that it's inclusive, which means these tools are not privy to the people in power, to the people who have the information. These tools, we hope, are to make everyone a better network leader, because when everyone in the group becomes a better network leader, then the network is benefits. All right, so let's go through the questions. And again, I'm just going to kind of watch the chat here. Thanks for motivational, reinforcing comments. I always encourage those for any speaker. Okay, so for type, questions here might be simply, what type of network are we? And I do want to note that all of these we've determined can have multiple responses, which makes it hard to tally at the end, but it is just the way that networks are. For purpose, the question that you might ask is, what is the primary purpose of the network? And I'm going to come back up and go through choices in a moment here. Membership. So we often skip membership. We've worked with so many networks where we say, who gets to come? Who's making the decision about who's included? And it's an equity issue as much as just access to also diverse thinking that we need in networks. So who are the members of the network? What is the level of turnover within network membership? What's the expectations of their participation? How is membership decided? What roles are members assigned and expected to play? And what resources are members expected to contribute? We could probably have a resources row in there, but we went ahead and did this so that we could kind of like profile the member. What's our ideal member? Who are we aiming for? What is our strategy around being inclusive and using members in ways that are going to benefit the entire group? So we'll go through that. And then we have a category of outcomes. So questions to consider around outcomes are, what outcomes are the networks working towards successfully achieving? How is the network working towards achieving those goals and outcomes? And what contributes to network success? So we're kind of mixing there like actual outcomes and then perception of success. You'll learn more and more about these dimensions as we go through the next few months. Governance is another thing that we often fail to actually talk about as we're developing our network. So who decides what the network is going to do and how do they decide that? This is really important. I mean, we could be using a backbone organization or we could be using distributive leadership. Those are different approaches, and we'll go through that in a second. What stage of development is the network currently in? So this is more of a very traditional SWOT kind of thinking around where are we in our network. So this will feel probably a little more familiar. Life cycle is one where I am adamantly sure that we are failing as a field. What is the intended timeline for this network? And I say this so much because we fail to articulate what the end of our network is, which means the people we're asking to come along with us have no idea where they're going and what the end is. So it's important for us to think through, is this perpetual, time limited? Are we going to stop when we reach a goal, and so forth? When we talk about this with people, we've been experimenting with this a little bit, we can get people to buy in better when they know what the life cycle is, what the expectation is. Management is something we'll work through in the NLTA. Again, just understanding how are we going to manage this network is something we probably want to think through. How is the network facilitated? What is the communication structure flow? How is conflict going to be managed? How are challenges and opportunities managed in the network? As I'm going through these, I feel it myself. There's so much in here. We would not suggest that you have to know the answer to every single one of these, but you might want to pick one or two, especially those places where you might find that there's not a lot of understanding in your group about where you're going. Structure and quantity of interactions. This should say quantity and quality of interactions. There's just questions that we have. This is where people love network visualizations. Like, what does our network actually look like if we visualized it, and what is that structure? So we have some versions of pictures here that you'll see look like our my other slide. What is the frequency of meetings for the network? What types of interactions are we trying to foster? What's the quality of those interactions between members? And what's the strategy for relationship building in the network? Oh shoot, I think it was Lisa said, I'm not looking at you all, so I've forgotten. This is a muscle, right? So how are we going to exercise this muscle? Okay, and just two more areas, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Two big questions here. Does your network have a clear definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And are there systems in place to address it? You're gonna see here that we don't have choices. So I am the first to say I am a learner in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion in networks more than an expert. And our team is always learning in this area. So we have left these open in hopes that we're going to learn from the people using these documents. So rather than try to populate it with all of the things that we think should be in there, especially right now in times of in our times today. We want to use this as a learning opportunity. So that's why they're left open, actually, in this way. Finally, assessment, evaluation, and learning. This is, we have outcomes questions, but really this is how are we linking those to impact? You know, how is impact being tracked? Who are we trying to address an impact and effect? This, we don't have a lot in here because the entire step 3 for us that we go through in our method is basically assessment, evaluation, and learning. So all we are trying to check here is like, do you have a system for that? Yes or no, and who are you impacting? So we don't go into a lot of depth in our own strategy document here, only because we go into extreme depth in the next few steps. Okay. So I'm going to pause there, and I would like to open it up just a little bit and see if anyone has any thoughts or comments on these areas before we go through any of the other parts of it.
Danielle, I have just a quick question, just how to input the data. So I'm in the spreadsheet that was shared there. So do you input it directly, or is that a silly question now?
No, not at all. So interestingly, Davey, everything that we do around this method is inside of our platform. So it's very digital, you know, automated. You spit out metrics and maps and beautiful things. This is something that, oh, and I should have said this to start with. This is a newer tool for us, and before we program anything, we're putting it out into the world for comments and shared learning with it. So right now we don't have an automated way to collect the data on this. We have used this with several networks so far, and we had the opportunity to do it in person with them, where we would hand this out. So when you hand it out, that's why we're so proud that it's easily printable, which is so irrelevant right now. But the idea is that people would actually draw on it with a circle and a star. And what we have done, which I can share also, is we have come up with a way to tally people's responses in like an accompanying worksheet. That said, what I would recommend if you want to do this with folks is, and I've asked our team to think about how to put this into a different format, like simply like a PDF or even a Word document. What I would recommend right now is that if Davey, you wanted to send this out to 3 people and get people's input on it, ask them to come on here and maybe ask them for something like either to put a circle around these, or, you know, instead of a circle, turn that text orange, you know, and then turn all of the text green for things that you think you should be. So find a way to do it that way as well. But also check back, because this is a problem I'm feeling like so strongly that I almost can't like talk through it right now. We're going to fix this, that we need to figure out a way to use this more virtually, that we hadn't really, you know, thought through until we were working with the formatting of it. And the other thing I would say about that is, there is a survey that accompanies this, which asks questions in a survey format around these dimensions. So you could skip this step and move into the survey part of it. And Davey, we're opening that up to everyone in the NLTA, but we definitely don't want to be exclusive. So just contact us after and we'll talk through how you could use it. That's a way you could administer it through the platform as well. But, sorry, one other thing on that is this is capturing people's perceptions of where you should be, of your strategy. So this is what this is doing is this is taking an approach that says we want to get everyone's input on the network of where we should be. So it's a very transparent, open, collaborative way to build a strategy if you use it in that way. You can use it as a personal tool and help it guide you, or through it with a couple of people as well. It's the information in here, I think, that makes it useful tool. And this is not the only tool, but we like how we've put it together. Anyone else have any questions or thoughts?
Yeah, this is Hillary.
Hi, Hillary.
Can you tell, like, I'm really fascinated by the type of network.
Okay.
And I'm just thinking about my own network. And when you were sharing it on screen initially, like I could only see like the first 4 things. And I was kind of like, well, we're a little bit of an association. We're kind of a community of practice. There's elements of the cohort. But now that I downloaded it and I'm looking at the whole thing, I'm like, ooh, regenerative. That sounds interesting. Tell me more about that. Because I feel like, you know, not to get too in the weeds of like the Fen network, but like it's sort of this big amorphous, like, you know, unfocused thing, but then it itself spawns like sub networks and projects, and you know, there's sort of like all this dynamism happening underneath the surface. And you know, some of the projects we try to run as their own mini networks, and I don't know, there's just like, it's very complicated, and I'm sort of feeling like it fits in a few boxes, but I'm like, yeah, I'd like to hear more about the whatever regenerative networks looks like.
Well,
or yeah.
Good news is next Wednesday at the NLTA, Curtis Ogden is speaking, and he will speak a lot about regenerative networks. I actually am not even an expert on them, but I bet you some of the folks in food and climate systems have better language than I would around them. The reason I'm going to put it off in that way right now is because that's actually one we've added recently. It's a really good example of how this gets updated. That's become a framework that's become much more, I mean, for lack of a better word, like trending or popular in networks, familiar over time, over even very recently. And so it's a field that is borrowed actually from another field, a term borrowed from another field and applied in networks now. So that you are latching onto that is not surprising to me, because that is where a lot of network thinking is right now, around how networks should be built. So I'm not going to go into—
I was so trendy.
Yeah. I'm not going to go into what it is right now.
Fine.
Just for time's sake, and because Curtis will speak more eloquently about it. But I do want to address one other thing. You do not have to fit into any of these boxes. You can pick something from all of them. What I would encourage you to do is figure it out. Figure out like, what is it that you are trying to do? Because you just rattled off like, we're sub networks, and then we're this and we're that, and very, very common for people to describe their networks as everything. We're just going to do everything. So remember that more is not better. And the more that you don't even have to label yourself. That's not the point here. The point here is to understand that you can't be everything, and that the clearer that we can be on what we are trying to be, then we can get there. But we can't get there if we don't know what we're trying to be. So that's just the point I'll make in that. So thanks for the question. Oh, good. And Melinda put an article in there on in the chat on— I hate the word regenerative. I have trouble saying it. So let's go through this just down the list, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but you'll see. And the thing is, if you were to print this out, it wouldn't be this teeny. This is just you'll see that the font sizes are actually pretty big, like 22 and so forth. So you can actually read this when you print it out. So around purpose, again, we have categories that you can pick many of, and it may be all of them, but we do want you to just articulate it and have shared language with your network around what you're trying to be. The whole purpose here is understand where you are trying to go, and then you can get there. So around purpose, we have to share, discover, develop, deliver, or scale as options. And then I'm not going to go through all of these, except I'll just call out some of the ones that, you know, may be more interesting. And some of them you're going to see are like what resources. You'll see these categories. Some of these categories we forced them in there because they do match the survey. So these are things that will be asked on the survey, but the survey is also modifiable. So if you have a different set of resources that you are trying to look for from your members, the question in the survey would ask, what resources are you able to contribute to this network? So that if you have a strategy that, you know, people should be contributing expertise and funding, we know who is self-identifying and how they're embedded in the network. So that's how it connects to that. Different things here for membership is, one of the things we really want to know is who are we expecting to stand up as a leader? Because if we are using a backbone approach where that backbone organization does all of the administrative work, that is one approach. But if you hope to make this network a network of the people in a year, it's probably an approach you need to start thinking about whether that strategy is going to work when you want to transition the backbone out. And that's often a strategy, is that people will start with a backbone organization with the intention that the backbone will want to remove itself and the network can stand on its own. It's not a good, the problem is people start with the backbone and they don't plan for the removal of the backbone. So by the time the backbone is trying to remove itself, the network will just fall apart because either funding or the backbone has left. So the idea here is that you are creating a membership scaffolding that will maintain the strategy of the network that you're trying to accomplish. So around outcomes, we have perceptions of success, and then also actual outcomes that you might want to measure and think about. Governance, I just mentioned a little bit about governance. You know, we do want to kind of think about who is making decisions for this network and what is our philosophy and our value statement around that, and how we want to implement it and how decisions are made. We just worked with a network and we asked them, how are decisions made in your network? And they are a fantastic network and they have amazing leadership, and they really couldn't tell us how decisions were made. And it was an interesting conversation because when we asked their network members, the network members didn't quite know either. And they also didn't know how membership was decided. So it was very informal. It's very impromptu happening, which I think is going to help them with their strategy in the long term to be able to understand clearly. So you'll see we're kind of coming low on time, and I don't want to spend all the time reading the document through to you. So there's different stages you can dive into and look at. The life cycle I mentioned, perpetual, time limited, outcome based, or temporary. We've seen a lot of networks stand up during COVID, a lot. And the question is, are they temporary, like a lot of response networks are, or are these meant to be perpetual? And I think it's a question we need to ask, because they are going to suck up resources from people, time, funding. And so let's make sure that we're not just creating hundreds and hundreds of new networks, but where are we leveraging and laying on the social fabric that already exists in our communities so we can strengthen that. So that's a reason I feel really strongly about that. You'll see some options there for management, from it being, more formal to less informal, and just some thinking about kind of how challenges and conflict are dealt with, which is always comes up in the network, maybe not as much in the beginning as you get more comfortable with each other. The structure and quantity and quality of interactions is actually a section here that is very SNA or survey driven from our perspective, meaning like we can really collect data on these things where some of the others are more intangible. These kinds of interactions, quantity of interaction and things like that is something that we really specialize in using the partner tool to do. So
can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
And overall, I'm wondering, in your experience using your tool and in other systems, to what degree have you used this in intentionally always only online, decentralized? It would be rare that people would be meeting in person networks.
Oh, frequently. The tool wouldn't care in a way. And let me, what I'm going to do is jump over. The reason I'm not even spending a lot of time on the tool now is we're going to give everyone access to this. And what I do want you to be able to do though, and because not everyone from the NLTA is here, we're going to show you this again in the next week's session, but I'm going to go into it. I do always say the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has been the funder of the tool for its first 7 years, and then they asked us to build a sustainability plan, and that's why we built a revenue model around it. But it does these things. You'll get these slides. We call it a community partner relationship management system now. It's a CPRM. because we do want to make sure that people understand we're not asking you to put your data in and it's one and done, is that this is a living tool that you can use like you would a CRM, where you can track these networks over time. These are ecosystems that are evolving, and to be able to see that change over time is awesome. And so we've really shifted the tool so that it can be something an organization or a network could use as part of its infrastructure over time. It has a 19 question validated survey that 90% of folks have used. We're kind of shifting over to this strategy survey, which embodies the 19 question survey, but it also includes these other areas that we've learned about. But just this survey itself lets you measure those interrelationships, contribution and attribution, perceptions and agreement among members. And so we'll go into all of this in more detail in some of the other sessions. The one thing I do like to let people know is that where we use other tools like Gephi or Kumu or other things to put network visualizations and analysis in, but we use Partner for everything because you can set up your survey and data collection, and then it will automatically populate the maps and the GIS maps and the graphs and charts, and you don't ever have to leave the system, and you don't have to know what to do. So we've designed this for like the most lay user, like the practitioner at the health department who's running their tobacco coalition in North Carolina maybe. So the idea here was not for research and for this, but we really focus on this high quality data perspective. So just in the last minute or so here, and I can stay on and answer some questions, but I do want to show you what I mean by this. So if you haven't already, what you'll want to do is you'll want to log or come in here and set up a password, or a login. So just come in and register, and then you'll have to, you can go to partner.visiblonetworklabs.com or aspen.visiblonetworklabs.com. And then it's a two-factor authentication, and you'll come in. And so this is what we want everyone to kind of start prepping for, is being able to use this if you want to. And we'll let you follow along with the strategy document by using the strategy survey. It's actually slow right now. It's going in. And once you're in there, you will see that there are two ways to play around with the data. You can do a practice survey, or there's a sandbox data set. It's really slow right now. There it is. That you can use, that I have actually hidden right now. And then all of your projects start getting populated here. And what we're going to have you all do is, when you come into the system, this was where you will load in members of your network, set up your survey, send emails. The analyze is where you go into the network maps and all of that stuff. But what we're going to have you all do, if you want to use this, is this is telling me that I already sent the survey out, but this is a demo, so we're okay. We're adding as a template the strategy document. So what you'll be able to do is come down. There's other templates you can pick as well, but you'll pick the strategy one, and it'll populate it with all the questions that match that tool that I just showed you. So no need to absorb that right now. All I want you to absorb is that crazy spreadsheet of all that information. I just did kind of want to leave you with something to look forward to, that you might be able to think about as you're thinking about tools. We really want to make sure that you leave each session with tools in hand that you can use in implementation of building data-driven network strategies. So we'll go over that in more detail in other times, but if you want to go in and make a registration, you'll have access. It's so slow right now. I don't know if it's my internet or our system, but something's slow. But when you go in, if you hit to go into the sandbox data set right here, then you can do analysis and see how all of this works. And there it is. So there's a data set in here that you can play with and something to look forward to. But the network maps are important, and they're interesting, and they teach us, but all of those dimensions that we measure actually get fed into these maps, either as, for example, an attribute that you can see. So when you use those dimensions, what we want you to be able to do is think about all of those dimensions that you can measure in the strategy document as they're embedded in your network. And so this will put those in there. So like, you know, well, this is letting me choose tie type, but if I, my point in this is that we are going to help you understand how to take that data that is behind the map and fill it into this question of how all of those things that we're trying to understand in our strategy are related to the ways in which we're building the relationships. So it's much more than a map. It's mostly about the data behind it and the way we integrate all of those data points into these visualizations of our network. All right, so that was a ton of information. I'm pretty much known for like flooding people with stuff. And it's just a little bit of all of it, but I want this to be as relatable as possible. So what I'm hoping folks will take away today is the download of this. You can absorb it, and we'll continue to have opportunities for webinars like this and open office hours anytime we can talk about it and just work with you on thinking about your strategies. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop there and just end with asking if there's any questions from anyone. Okay. Okay. Silence always either means it's too much or everyone has to go. But we'll keep working on this. You know, the nice thing about the NLTA for those folks who are along with us for the ride on that is that we, this is just the beginning, right, of our journey on becoming better network leaders and using all these different types of tools. So take what you want from all of these sessions, get rid of the rest, let it leave your brain space. And what's really exciting is, you know, the rest of the sessions are also going to have a lot of diversity. You've heard a lot from me, but I'm not going to be the speaker most of the time from now on, except on these one-off sessions. So you're going to get a lot of rich information from others. For folks that aren't in the network right now, like Davey, like let's connect. So let's see how we can get you connected to all the things that are going on. And Pooja is going to be your point of contact, of course, for all things community. So you guys are going to be surprised. We're trying to actually make the best platform for communication possible, and she's got something up her sleeve that she's going to roll out here soon for us. So, okay. Thank you, everyone.